Welcome to Distracted, the podcast with Angela Lockwood, the place where you will find practical brain-boosting strategies, expert insights, and real-life stories to help busy brains thrive in the age of distraction. Let's go. Welcome to Distracted. I'm Angela Lockwood. Today I am going to share with you a little bit about something that I often get on my soapbox about. If you've ever heard me speak live at a presentation or in a workshop, there is one topic that often sets me off on a really big tangent. And I always feel like I have to add in a disclaimer once I start on that tangent, because I know that if I do go off on this tangent, so many people will often either argue back to me, they might get a little bit offended. But I know once I start on that train of thought and I start talking about this topic that I'm going to share with you today, you'll see my point. You will see why. Now, maybe it might change a little bit of your behavior listening to this episode today. But look, let me tell you what it is. It is my dislike for smart watches. So, yep, any smartwatch and Apple Watch in particular is something that I have a real thing about. Some of you listening to this might have just taken a big gasp and went, is she serious? How dare she go off on this tangent and talk about Apple Watches? But just hear me out here. So, like I said, a lot of times I talk about my dislike for them. I find that, I actually don't wear a watch, actually. I better start there. I'll tell you why I don't wear a watch. Many, many years ago, my life felt like it was basically an hourly rate that would just sort of click over. So I was seeing kids in my clinic as an occupational therapist, and I would look, and all my time was scheduled. I would, know that at 9 o'clock in the morning, I'd see my first child, and then I'd need to be looking at my watch for when the next child comes in. Did I have enough time to write my reports? And so my whole day was constantly, I felt, being judged or being, I guess, guided by or even getting pushed or by time. And what would happen then after I would be working is I would then go and teach aerobics at night time as well. Now, for those of you that have been to the gym before, or even or done sort of a group exercise class, everything is dictated by time. Now, I wasn't the type of aerobics instructor that could do all the really great coordinated moves. I was doing like the boxing moves where everything was about repetition and time and sets. So what I was doing is during the day being dictated by time, and then I'd go and do something I love at nighttime, but I found that I was constantly looking at my watch. And I shared this with a really wonderful, beautiful mentor of mine at the time. And I said, look, I'm finding that I'm getting really stressed by it. Now, this was about 15, 20 years ago. So this was even before we became so obsessed with how we use our time and productivity. This was so long ago. And I remember sharing it with her, and she said, "Ange, why don't you have a break from wearing a watch then?" And I was like, are you serious? There's no way I can live my life without wearing a watch. And she said, but you think about it. She said, you are surrounded by clocks. You have a clock on the wall. In the gym, there's a clock. In your practice, there's a clock. Time is around you. It's not like having it attached to your wrist means that you don't know what the time is. And so I had this experiment. I took my watch off and I stopped wearing it. And what I realized at the time was actually quite a huge shift in my feeling of being under pressure with time, but also stress. My chest felt a lot freer. I didn't feel so much like time was always running out. Now, I do have to say, I do have a bit of an obsession with time. If I look at my books, if you've ever downloaded my free book called What's on Angela's Bookshelf, you will see there's a lot of books on there that is all about time. One of my favorite books is called The Timekeeper by Mitch Albom. And everything, I guess, I'm always really fascinated by how we use our time and what we do with that time in our lives as well. So I do have a bit of a predisposition, I guess, to being fascinated by time. But I felt like the watch just magnified that so much in a way that wasn't good for me. Now, I don't know, this might be resonating with you a little bit too. You might be like, I actually get this, Ange. Some of you might be going, is she nuts? I have no idea what she's talking about. But I'm sure there's a couple of you listening on here that are going, I get this. And I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you that you go, yeah, actually, you know what? I understand that pressure of time. I always feel like I'm looking at my watch or my phone or my computer or even just the clock. And for a lot of us that, is our work is dictated by time, it's really hard to separate ourselves from always looking at the clock. But the act of moving this watch off my wrist, what it did is it didn't stop time. It didn't prevent me from knowing what the time was. What it did is it distanced me from, I guess the thing that I felt was connecting me to pressure and stress, which was always watching time. So, what I did recently is I had a chat to my brother, and we were chatting about time again. And I was talking about health, and I was saying about how I'd really love to know the amount of steps I do in a day, because some days I'm super active, other days I feel like I'm tied to my desk. And, I've tried all the different, timers, and I get up and I move around a lot. And I said, but I'd really love to know, how many steps am I actually doing? And some of you might be thinking, well, you could just use your phone for that. But I sort of live and breathe and practice what I preach. I don't have my phone near me all the time. I don't have it connected with me. I don't carry it around with me. So sometimes when I go to exercise, I don't want my phone with me at all. I want that time to be out in nature. I want that time to be where I'm not connected with people. So I don't take my phone with me. But what he said was, "Hey, I have an Apple Watch." And as soon as he said that, I could feel my chest tighten. I'm thinking, "You surely can't get on your soapbox with your brother." But he said, "Hey, we've got this spare Apple Watch. Do you want it? You can do all these really cool things with it. You can track your health, and you've got everything on there. You've got your messages, and you can take your phone calls." And I just felt immediately everything just came to the surface, and yep, I went off on my little rant with him. And what we ended up, I always do this with people, is I go through and I rationalize why I find watches are really distracting. And there's a couple of reasons. So let me share this with you, why this is not just me with some issue with Apple Watches. If you're an Apple Watcher yourself, a wearer yourself, that you are literally inviting a lot of distractions to you. Like, you've actually strapped distractions to your wrist. And what I mean by this is, if you have messages that are enabled on your phone, every single time you get a text message, it pops up. So it doesn't matter what you are doing, you feel the vibration, and you also hear, you might have the little notification ding on it, or you might just see you're working on something and the visual of the message pops up on your wrist. So whatever you're doing, immediately your attention shifts from what you're doing to the watch, and of course then to the message or whatever's the alert is. Same goes for a phone call, but same also then goes for notifications of anything. So if you have any of the health notifications set up, you're going to get a little message that pops up to tell you when you should stand, that it's time to move, or that it's time to do whatever else you've set it up for. And it was interesting because even talking to my brother about this and thinking, well, I can see the benefit. This is literally what I want. I want it to tell me when I need to stand up, or how many steps I've done. I thought, you know what? It is time for me to test it out myself. So rather than me always standing in front of audiences and talking about all the negatives about an Apple Watch, I really should try it myself. I've read all the research. I've read and I've listened to leaders in the field talking about how our Apple Watches are reducing connections in and connectivity in conversations, that people just seeing that you have an Apple Watch on actually reduces the amount of connection that they will feel to you in a conversation. Isn't that crazy? And we also know the same goes for our phone. If a phone is around, we feel a little bit less connected to that person because of that very distraction being there. But there's nothing worse too. I once was speaking at a school, And I was speaking to a teacher, and we were having a really important conversation to them. They wanted my input on some ways that they could help a child in their class focus a little bit better. And we were talking about the strategies that were really important. She was actually nearly in tears when we were talking. And I really felt for her, because this is a common question that I get asked by teachers is, how can I engage kids in my class? They just seem so distracted all the time. And what I found really interesting in this conversation is, despite her emotion, despite her need and desire to want to know strategies and want things to be easier for her in the classroom, but also want it to be easier for the children in her classroom, the amount of times she looked at her watch while we were talking actually became quite amusing to me. I could stand there as an outsider and see the irony in our conversation. So she had her watch on her wrist, and while we were talking, she had messages come through, she silenced a phone call, and she had other little dings and things. And what I found is she actually ended up apologizing to me 2, maybe 3 times throughout our conversation for the distraction of her watch. Now, if you've worked with me before, and I hope that you are a long-time listener of here on Distracted, you will know my slant. If you are a new listener here on Distracted, first of all, welcome. And you have got me on my biggest rant episode to date. So, yeah, welcome. I'm glad you are here. But one of the things that I found when I was talking to her was, yes, I couldn't hold back. I couldn't not comment on what I was observing. And so what we did is we ended up having a conversation around how sometimes we invite distraction into our world, that almost sets us up for failure, that our willpower alone won't help us. You know, that sometimes we invite distractions in, whether it be through having not just notifications on our computers, but that we might, just different structures that an educator might have in their classroom. I won't go into all that detail here, but all the different structures in a classroom that teachers might set up that become distracting for kids. And in fact, this is information that I go through on my Educator Circle membership called the Learning Bridge. If you are an educator, and some of this content that I'm talking about is really resonating with you, I encourage you to head over to angelalockwood.com.au/the learning bridge, and you will find information there, which is my membership for parents and educators. But the Educator Circle is just for you teachers who are looking at ways to minimize distractions in your classrooms and to get the help and the resources you need to create focused, very vibrant classrooms. So I digress a little bit there. But for this teacher, when we were speaking about how to do exactly that, how do I set up a classroom that engages the kids even when they're often so distracted, they're on their computers in class, or they find that they can't sit and on floor time and listen to the teacher for a extended length of period of time. And it was interesting, because then at that point I had to say, do you mind if I make a comment that might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable? And she sort of stopped talking and looked at me, and she said, oh, no, that's fine. I'm happy. Now, at this stage, it wasn't just a teacher I had just met. She had been in a workshop with me, so she sort of knew my context. And I hadn't gone on my rant yet about Apple Watches. But what was interesting is I sort of went on and said to her, what I've noticed in our conversation is that you have looked at your watch many times, that we are talking about something that's quite close to you, that's made you quite emotive, and something that I can see you're really struggling with. But while we've been talking, your watch has distracted you and shifted your attention to the point where you've needed to apologize, where it's taken you a little while to get back into our conversation. And I've just noticed that your watch might be distracting you. Have you ever felt like that? And what I loved about talking to the teacher like this is that it opened absolutely a non-judgmental space, and it opened up and gave her permission as well to share I guess what was frustrating her. But what was interesting is that she had never connected the dots between her watch actually distracting her. And she said to me, this is really amazing. She said, you know what, it's interesting you say that, because there is actually times when I'm standing there teaching a class and I see an email come up on my watch. I look at it and I've even forgotten what I was saying to the kids. And then she then started with a couple more examples. And this teacher, I really admired her for sharing that with me, because it's not easy to go, hey, you know what, I actually know this is a problem, but I just don't know what to do. Or, hey, I know that this is something that's distracting me, but how do I stop it? And that's probably the question I get more and more, is I know that this is distracting me, but how do I stop it? And so, what this conversation started with this educator was that it was actually about, how do I support the kids in my class? But we know the easiest way to change behavior is to focus on our own. And so, what started out as that sort of, how can I support my class? How can I change my classroom structure? What we were able to do is go, okay, well, what's one thing you could do to make you feel calmer, make you feel less distracted? And what we came up with was her watch. And so she committed to not wearing her smartwatch anymore. So she literally took it off. It was an experiment. And I checked back in with her a couple of weeks later and I said, how did it go? And the difference for her between pre-wearing watch to post-wearing watch, or removing the watch, I should say, was huge. What she said is she sort of realized that her time was always feeling so fragmented, that she always felt like she was never really present or never really there, whether it be in conversations with parents, with students, even when she took that home with her own kids, that she always felt like there was so much to do and that she couldn't be fully present in whatever she was doing. And I loved hearing this, because I knew this to be true from research. I also knew this to be true through when I speak to people. Now, one of the things I do is, if somebody who's wearing a smartwatch or with a phone, if I am in a conversation with them, um, if they look at their phone or check something, or they look at their watch or check something, I just stop talking, because there is a disconnect in that conversation. And it's a way of literally saying to somebody, hey, what I'm going to do, this is actually more important right now than what we're talking about. So my cheeky strategy is, I just stop talking. And what often happens is the person then comes back in and realizes that they had lost focus, or they had disconnected from the conversation. So rather than me always pointing it out to other people, just going back to my conversation that I had with my brother, I thought, well, I want to test it out myself. I want to commit and wear the watch and just see what it does for me. I want to observe. So this is probably after about 15 years of not wearing any type of time device on me, of wearing any type of watch. So I got the Apple Watch, and I was really excited, because I thought, this is going to be interesting. I could either completely surprise myself and realize all the wonderful benefits that the watch has. And I know that there are some really great features on the phone, but what I'm talking about is the context of being distracted. And so I set it all up. But one thing I said was a non negotiable to my experiment. I didn't want phone calls coming through on my watch, and I didn't want messages. And I just wanted the watch as a health device. So, as a tool to help me understand my health needs better. So I went through and it all did its magical pairing, and I went through and did all the notification turn-offs and Googled what I needed to. And what was interesting, even just during this setup period of the watch, was that I could feel myself getting stressed. I could feel myself going, but I don't want I don't want my cards on my phone, on my watch. But I don't want that on my watch. But I also don't. So how do I turn that off? And I could feel myself getting quite stressed and quite um, almost like overwhelmed and frantic a little bit in just trying to set the watch up in the first place. Now, some of you on here might be going, is she serious? It is so easy to do that. But there was a lot of things on there I didn't want connected. So it was quite a process for me to go through to make sure that things weren't connected. Now, my husband called me on my phone and I could feel the vibration on the watch going off. And I had thought I had said no, that I didn't want. I'd sort of disconnected the phone from the watch. But clearly I hadn't. So I had to go back in and have a look at the new, the different settings that I needed to set up. Anyway, all that boring stuff aside about setup, I could feel right from the get-go, I was feeling stressed. I was feeling overwhelmed, even just in getting the thing on my wrist. Now, I understand for some people, their watch feels like it's their life. But what I'm getting so often after any type of workshop or presentation that I do, that people are coming up and saying to me that their watch, they've never realized how much their watch distracts them. Or they understand, even just on their phones or even messages coming through on their iPads, that everything being so connected means that they're always connected. And I don't mean connected in the good, deep, loving way. I mean connected as in the lots of notifications popping up constantly, people being able to get you 24/7. I mean that connected. And so I'm hearing more and more that people are almost feeling like they're trapped by the very technology that sort of promised to free them. And one of the things I noticed in setting up the watch as well was that there was a little bit of fear from me about going, have I done this right? Have I set it up correctly? I put it on my watch, on my wrist, sorry. And interestingly, after 15 years of not wearing a watch, the very feeling of having a watch around my wrist made me feel a little bit tense. I didn't love the feeling of it on my wrist, but I persisted. And it was on a Friday night that I did this. So I was going, cool, in the weekend, I'm going to go through the weekend where it's a bit quieter. I'll be able to get my head around it. I'll be able to test it out. And we were watching a movie as a family. So we were all sitting around watching a movie. And everyone was excited because I thought it was hilarious that I was wearing a smartwatch, considering what I always speak about. And we were sitting there watching and very calm, very relaxed Friday night. And then all of a sudden, my wrist started to have a big ring come from it. It started to vibrate, and we all jumped. We were all like, "Oh my gosh, what's that?" What it was my watch was telling me I needed to stand. And obviously, I'd set the goals that I wanted and all that sort of stuff. But I just looked at it and I thought, I do not want something. I felt like I was relaxed, having this beautiful time with my family, and now something's yelling at me, telling me that I needed to stand up. Now, I know that this isn't the experience for everybody, but it was that moment that I went, this is not for me. If I am in a calm, relaxed state, enjoying a beautiful, connected time with my family, that doesn't always happen. I do not want my watch dinging, vibrating, literally shaking me to say, get up, you need to move. And I just couldn't, I don't know. I don't know about you. I got a little bit cranky with it, right? Because I'm like, I just was so relaxed and now you've woken me up. Now, so many times I hear this from people that they're in, a meeting and something and it goes off and you have to sort of apologize and go, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You're in a conversation with someone that might be a little bit, sensitive conversation and the phone rings on your watch. Now, yes, you can silence and you can do all that. But really, this episode today is about just bringing your awareness to if you are feeling distracted, if you are feeling like you are constantly on, then what I would love for you to do is just think if you are a smartwatch wearer, that just have a look at it now and think, could that be adding to my load? Could that be adding to my overwhelm? Now, for everybody, that's not the case. For some people, you actually are quite fine with it. Your notifications are important to you. You've got it all set up in a way that really works for you. But for many people, I know that their smartwatches are not doing what they had hoped. They are actually interfering with the things that really matter to them. So if that is you, then I want you, maybe just encourage you, I should say, to have a little break from it and just see how that feels for you. I can guarantee you your watch will not be too far from you. Your phone won't be too far from you. I can guarantee you that somebody will be able to connect with you whether or not you have a smartwatch or not. Now, for those of you that use it and love it, keep going. It's clearly not something that's interrupting your life or your thinking, or it's not adding to your overwhelm. But for those of you that are feeling quite distracted and feeling constantly on and constantly connected and need to create some space, to have a little bit of time off from the noise and just to have those deep conversations or even be in deep work without being contacted or without being distracted or without being disrupted, then maybe a really simple strategy is have a break from that smartwatch and see how you feel. So, if there is anything else that you would like support with in the way of distraction and helping you find greater focus in your life, and you are a new listener, please go back and listen to lots of episodes of Distracted. There's a whole lot of fantastic information on here, not just from me, but from also the guests, the amazing guests I have here on Distracted. You can listen wherever you listen to your amazing podcasts. And it's also on YouTube if you want to have a look at the video recordings with me and my guests. But I mentioned also earlier the Learning Bridge. Now, the Learning Bridge is a membership for parents and for educators because I am getting constant questions from parents about how do I support my kids in this age of distraction. I also hear from educators, how do I keep kids engaged? They are always distracted. I need resources, I need tools, I need strategies to help better support the kids in my class. So what I decided was that I created the Learning Bridge, and it's two memberships. So there's two pillars of the membership. One is just for parents and one is just for educators. It's a monthly membership, and whether you're an educator or whether you're a parent, there is information tailor designed to you. They're communities that are built around parents and a community built around educators. So you are mixing with like-minded people who are also having similar difficulties. You'll have access to me to ask me any questions you like through our live masterclasses once a month, but you also have access to the online portal, which is so beautiful and simple that you have resources that you can download, but you also have the ability to chat with other people who are there and part of the membership. So the Learning Bridge, if you head on over to angelalockwood.com.au/the Learning Bridge, you'll see the two pillars there, whether you're a parent or whether you're an educator. I would love to have you come join me on the Learning Bridge. I'm so passionate about it. It is a membership directly created because you asked for it. I hear these questions over and over again from parents and from educators wanting greater support in how to help kids thrive when there is so much vying for their attention. So if you have any questions, head on over to angelalockwood.com.au/the Learning Bridge, and all of the information about the Learning Bridge membership is on there. But little disclaimer before we finish up. Love Apple products, but smartphones do not work for me. And that's the whole thing, guys, that it doesn't matter if there is the latest technology out there. It doesn't matter what strategies people are using. If it doesn't work for you, then don't use it. If it does work for you, great. That is the best strategy to help manage overwhelm, manage distraction, manage, depletion of energy. Whatever works for you and whatever you implement is the best strategy for you. But if you know that there's something not working, that you're feeling overwhelmed and you know you need to make that change, then maybe something as simple as having a break from your smartwatch might be all it takes. All right, everyone, thanks so much for joining me here on this episode. If you feel that someone might benefit from listening to this episode, make sure you share it with them. All the shareable links are included in the show notes for this episode. But until next time, I wish you all the very best in finding space and calm in your life. And thanks so much for joining me, everyone. I'm Angela Lockwood.